Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In Indonesia, the death toll from Friday's devastating earthquake and tsunami continues to rise, with the official toll now topping 1,400 dead. An Indonesian government spokesperson said rescue efforts continue as the risk of hunger, disease, and a lack of basic necessities pose new challenges.
2,509 people are heavily injured and being treated in hospitals. 113 people are missing, 152 people have been buried, and 70,821 people have taken refuge in 141 different spots.
A volcano on the island of Sulawesi, where Friday's earthquake occurred, has erupted, spewing volcanic ash into the air, further complicating rescue efforts from the tsunami and earthquake. Meanwhile, scientists are warning that rising sea levels due to climate change will make future tsunamis like last week's disaster even more destructive. In a major expose, the New York Times has revealed President Trump inherited his family's wealth through tax dodges and outright fraud, receiving at least $413 million in inflation-adjusted dollars from his father's real estate empire. The New York Times' 13,000-word investigative report found Fred and Mary Trump, Donald Trump's parents, transferred more than $1 billion in wealth to their children, much of it to Donald Trump himself, paying less than 5% of the $550 million in taxes they should have under inheritance tax rates. The Times reports Donald Trump helped his parents undervalue real estate holdings by hundreds of millions of dollars in IRS tax returns. The Times also reports Trump earned $200,000 a year in today's dollars from his parents' companies beginning at the age of 3, with a salary that increased to $1 million a year after Trump graduated college and to $5 million a year when Trump was in his 40s. During the 2016 campaign, Trump repeatedly portrayed himself as a self-made billionaire whose only head start was, quote, a small loan of $1 million from his dad.
It's not been easy for me. It has not been easy for me. And, you know, I started off in Brooklyn. My father gave me a small loan of $1 million. I came into Manhattan, and I had to pay him back, and I had to pay him back with interest.
In fact, the New York Times reports Fred Trump lent his son Donald at least $140 million in inflation-adjusted dollars, and much of it was never repaid. As the New York Times expose broke on Tuesday, the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance said it's opened an investigation into the Times' allegations of Trump's fraud and tax evasion. Republican Senate leader Mitch McConnell said Tuesday the FBI is wrapping up its investigation into sexual misconduct allegations against Judge Kavanaugh, and that he's prepared to call a vote on President Trump's Supreme Court nominee by the end of the week.
We'll get an FBI report soon. It'll be made available to each senator, and only senators will be allowed to look at it. And that's the way these reports are always handled.
The Washington Post reports FBI agents spoke on Tuesday with a former Georgetown prep classmate of Kavanaugh's named Tim Gaudette. He hosted a party on July 1st, 1982, which investigators have been zeroing in on. According to his own calendar, Kavanaugh drank along with at least 2 other classmates who were identified by Christine Blasey Ford as present at the gathering when she was allegedly sexually assaulted. The investigation barreled toward a rapid conclusion as lawyers for Dr. Blasey Ford said they were baffled that the FBI has yet to question her over her allegations that Kavanaugh tried to rape her in 1982 when they were both teenagers. Lawyers for another Kavanaugh accuser, Debbie Ramirez, said Tuesday the FBI had not interviewed another 20 witnesses Ramirez has identified. Meanwhile, the New York Times published a letter Kavanaugh wrote to his high school classmates in the summer of 1983 as he planned a Beach Week celebration on Maryland's coast. The letter, which Kavanaugh signed FFFFF Bart, urges the classmates to, quote, warn the neighbors that we're loud, obnoxious drunks with prolific pukers among us, unquote. Kavanaugh was 18 at the time. Maryland had just raised its drinking age to 21. He signed the letter Bart, not Brett. Bart O'Kavanaugh is the name that his friend Mark Judge used in his book, Wasted. President Trump praised Judge Kavanaugh and mocked his accusers Tuesday. This is Trump speaking to reporters outside the White House.
Well, I say that it's a very scary time for young men in America when you can be guilty of something that you may not be guilty of. This is a very difficult time.
Later Tuesday, President Trump mocked Dr. Christine Blasey Ford during a campaign rally in Mississippi, just days after he'd called her a very credible witness.
36 years ago, this happened. I had one beer, right? I had one beer. Well, do you think it was? Nope, it was one beer. Oh, good. How did you get home? I don't remember. How'd you get there? I don't remember. Where is the place? I don't remember. How many years ago was it? I don't know. I don't know.
We'll have more on the fight over Judge Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court after headlines when we speak with Dr. Bandy Lee, a forensic psychiatrist on the faculty of Yale School of Medicine, co-author of a letter by mental health professionals warning Kavanaugh's behavior is consistent with someone struggling with an alcohol problem. The UN's top court has ordered the United States to lift sanctions on Iran for humanitarian and medical goods and services, as well as agricultural goods and those linked to aviation safety. The Trump administration reimposed unilateral sanctions against Iran in May after withdrawing from the Iran nuclear deal. The U.S. has questioned the UN's court jurisdiction and is expected to move ahead with further sanctions against Iran next month. In Afghanistan, at least 13 people were killed and dozens more injured Tuesday after a suicide bomber targeted a campaign rally near the eastern city of Jalalabad. The Islamic State group later claimed responsibility for the bombing. It's the latest in a string of attacks on election-related targets ahead of parliamentary elections on October 20th. Ethiopian state media reports at least 44 people were killed over the weekend as rival ethnic groups clashed in the west of the country. Violence and widespread displacement have continued to plague the Eastern African nation despite recently elected Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's promises to reduce ethnic tensions and violence. He made history by signing a peace agreement with neighboring Eritrea earlier this year. First Lady Melania Trump continued her solo tour in Africa by visiting Cape Coast Castle in Ghana, a seaside fortress used by slave traders starting in the 17th century. The former slave dungeon is now a monument to millions of Africans cast into slavery. After her visit, the First Lady told reporters she signed the site's guest book, "Thank you for your warm welcome. With love, Melania Trump." The State Department confirmed Tuesday the U.S. admitted just over 22,000 refugees during the last fiscal year, the lowest number in 40 years. The number of refugees resettled in the United States was half of the Trump administration's cap for the year of 45,000, a number that itself would have been among the lowest on record. At least 34 refugees have drowned off the Moroccan coast, according to the UN. A local activist says authorities failed to respond to the shipwreck for 36 hours after it was reported. Tens of thousands have attempted the perilous journey from Morocco to Europe by boat so far this year. The UN has recorded 1,700 refugee deaths in the Mediterranean since the start of 2018. Back in the United States, cell phone users across the country will receive a text message from the president later today as part of a test for an alert system managed by FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and the Federal Communications Commission. Televisions and radios will also receive alerts shortly after cell phones. The system allows the White House to send text messages to cell phone users only in cases of emergency, but some are already raising alarm that Trump or another president may try to abuse the system. In Virginia, federal prosecutors have charged 4 white supremacists from California with conspiracy and inciting riot at the deadly Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville last August. U.S. Attorney Thomas Cullen said the men also engaged in acts of violence in their home state of California at a series of political rallies, dubbing them serial rioters. Last year's protests left activist Heather Heyer dead after white supremacist James Alex Fields Jr. plowed his car into a crowd of peaceful counter racist protesters. In the wake of the rally, President Trump declared, "I think there is blame on both sides, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides," unquote. In Canada, University of Waterloo professor Donna Strickland will share the Nobel Prize for Physics for her work on creating advanced lasers. Strickland is just the third woman ever to win a Nobel Physics Prize and the first since 1963. Strickland's prize comes just 3 weeks after astrophysicist Jocelyn Bell Burnell was awarded the Special Breakthrough Prize in Fundamental Physics 50 years after she made a historic astronomical discovery, only to have her male advisor take credit and receive the Nobel Prize for her work. Bell Burnell will donate her $3 million award to fund scholarships for women, refugees, and other underrepresented groups. And in Mexico City, a giant Mexican flag was lowered to half-mast in the capital city's main Zocalo Square Tuesday to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Tlatelolco massacre. It was October 2nd, 1968, when hundreds of student protesters were gunned down by soldiers as they held peaceful protests on the eve of the Mexico City Olympic Games. This is Mexican President-elect Andrés Manuel López Obrador speaking at a ceremony commemorating the anniversary.
We guarantee that force will never be used again to resolve conflicts, differences, and social protests. That's the oath we make, to not make use of force, to not repress the people.
Just last week, a Mexican government official admitted for the first time the massacre amounted to a state crime, though no one has ever been prosecuted for the killings. This is Tlatelolco massacre survivor Juan Avila Arriaga, one of tens of thousands who marched from Tlatelolco Plaza Tuesday.
My name is Juan Avila Arriaga. I'm 67 years old, and today I came here because 50 years have passed since the soldiers opened fire on us. There were women, there were children, and I would like to speak about the young people, especially the students who were gunned down in 1968. The only thing that we had requested of the government was a public dialogue. This was the most important thing. Now in 2018, once again, young people and students are being disappeared and burned.
Arriaga was referring to the 43 students who vanished from the Ayotzinapa Teachers School in 2014 after they were attacked by local police. President-elect Andrés Manuel López Obrador has promised to create a truth commission to investigate the Ayotzinapa disappearances. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.